It's the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. We are 1 week away from Penn State football starting with training camp. So I brought in Dave Eckert. We are going to talk about the Penn State football roster and everyone's favorite thing about training camp, positional battles. Who's going to be the starter? Who's going to win in training camp? Dave, welcome. How excited are you for next week?
I'm hyped, T. Frank. This is gonna be fun. We're gonna get some good info, and yeah, this is the fun part, right?
This is what's up. This is what we all love. So let's get right into it. I don't want to waste any more time. I want to get into the position battles that you're looking at and the one that you're highlighting off the bat for Penn State football. Where are you looking first when you go to your first camp and you get to watch practice?
Sure. Running back is the one for me. Right. Yep. And I think that's probably at the top of a lot of people's lists just because it's glorious chaos. We have no idea how it's going to shake out. There's so many names and a couple slots, to fill. So it's going to be interesting because there's a lot of mouths to feed there and not that many carries. So that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, and a lot of guys that have similar skill sets. So I think it's an interesting way you can look at it a couple different ways so that my brain could make sense of it. I've been looking at it by skill set and who might have an advantage over somebody. How are you looking at it that way? Or are you looking at it as just the traditional 1, 2, 3 on the depth chart and who gets the starting reps versus the other guys? How do you see that position?
Sure. I think I kind of tend to look at it with that 1, 2, 3 mindset, just because I think that's how Penn State has done it in the past. But it's important to kind of know that they've had some really complete running backs in the past, so they haven't had to have a set third down back, so to say.
Yeah.
They've been able to throw out their guy on third down and have him be able to do a lot of that stuff. So maybe this year might be maybe the time where it's best to start looking at it like that. I don't know. My brain is kind of wired as 1, 2, 3, like I kind of said. But I'm open to modifying that, I guess.
So who are your 1, 2, 3? Who are the guys that you are looking at that you think have separated themselves and will be vying for those? I think top 2 positions are where everyone wants to be if you're a running back.
Sure. I think my top 3 are probably Noah Cain, then John Lovett probably, and then Kevon Lee. I think Noah Cain, obviously what we saw from him in his freshman season was impressive. And again, he was carrying an injury during a lot of that. So that's even more impressive. And then you look at John Lovett, obviously a guy they brought in from Baylor in the off season. He's played 4 seasons. He's a veteran. He knows how to do it. So again, I think he's gonna have a pretty big role. And Kevon Lee, he was great last year, right? I mean, where does Penn State finish last year without Kevon Lee?
Right.
So
yep.
Obviously he's a guy that's gonna have a say for sure. So those would probably be my trio, I guess.
Can you go Noah Cain, Kevon Lee? Because that's why I've looked at it as skill sets, because I don't know that you can go Thunder. I don't think you can go Noah Cain, Kevon Lee. And I tend to think those are the 2 guys that are the leads in the backfield as far as, Noah Cain has superstar potential. And the reason I wouldn't put him number 1 is what you mentioned. He had an injury his freshman year. He missed the entire season last year with an injury. He's been injured every year. And while a certain product of that is luck, a certain product of it after time isn't if you're proven to be injury prone. So sure. Where is he along that route back? Is he able to play? I'm not a betting man, so that's why I wouldn't put him number 1. Kevon Lee has been the most consistent guy, and I thought he looked a little more fluid and natural in the spring. So that's really my question. Can you put those guys 1 and 2, knowing that you got a carbon copy of one another in a lot of ways?
Sure, that's the tough part. And I am a betting man, just, full degeneracy over here. So, I guess maybe that's our difference in mindset. But I don't think that's wise. Because like you said, very similar skill sets. Obviously, we haven't seen a ton of John Lovett. Hopefully, maybe he can kind of provide a little bit of something different. but yeah, Penn State does have a lot of the same thing in its backfield. And, the two guys that, might be at the top of some lists, some depth charts heading into the fall, they're kind of carbon copies. So, it's tough. It's definitely tough.
And I don't want to spend too much time on this position because there's a ton that I want to get to, but it is interesting how dominoes fall and the repercussions of them. Because I think, and James Franklin has said as much, you would have had Kevon Lee redshirt last year, and Noah Cain would be heading into his junior season as a guy that played his freshman and sophomore season. This would be his last year before he goes to the NFL. That would be how it would play out most naturally. But because Kevon Lee came in last year and acquitted himself well in that situation, because he did so well as the lead back as a true freshman, now you can't take him back out. The genie's out of the bottle. So you've got to find a way to keep everyone involved, or you risk losing those guys. So then do you want to risk losing Noah Cain? Because the future Kevon Lee will be here presumably longer, although to say that Noah Cain's NFL dreams are on a stardom path at this point is untrue. But so it's just an interesting, it's a thicket you got there. As you said, glorious chaos. And I think that's a great way to put it. But highlighting those top three guys is important. I do think that you look at some of the other guys. Devin Ford is a big name that we've, everyone's talked about. He has taken a clear step back. It will take him a big training camp to get back into that conversation. I want to move to the outside because I think that's another position where if it's glorious chaos in the running back field, it is just straight chaos outside boundary receiver. We don't really have a great, there's not a ton of guys where you're like, I want to see that guy versus that guy. It's more like open roll call at boundary receiver opposite of Jahan Dotson, considering, by the way, that we're assuming Parker Washington is a slot receiver.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. Again, it's another spot where I'll throw my hands up. No idea. Right. It's gonna take a big training camp from somebody, and that it's up for grabs, and it's a spot where we saw it last year. You're there. There's opportunity for some younger guys. So it's gonna be interesting. I think looking at it right now, my favorite, I guess, to get most of the playing time there would probably be Cam Sullivan-Brown. Just because he's the veteran. James Franklin obviously likes him. He's made it very clear that he feels good about him when he's spoken to the media. So I guess he would probably be my pick, but I don't feel good about it. If we're making the gambling illusion again, I would need some pretty good odds to put some money there. But
you're going to be putting some money on the other side to cover you, right? You're not putting all your money on Cam Sullivan-Brown, and I don't blame you because I've said this before. This is his fourth breakout season. I think he is and the injuries are a real thing with Cam Sullivan-Brown. I don't want to make light of that, but we've been talking about Cam Sullivan-Brown for so long, and I know nothing about his game. I can tell you, I really don't know a whole lot about Cam Sullivan-Brown. Of the routes I've seen him run, he reminds me a little bit of Jahan Dotson, as far as a smooth operator, a separator, not really a big physical or a speed guy. So that's a lot of the sameness at that position. And I think the guy that Keandre Lambert-Smith is the other guy that is the obvious one, because Daniel George, at this point, I do think we know what he is. Keandre Lambert-Smith offers more upside as that big-bodied, long-legged, can make big plays and be a possession plus receiver. But I'll throw one other name in there. And again, I don't feel good about this one. I would have felt better about Lonnie White Jr., but I'm going to throw a freshman in there and say Liam Clifford maybe has a leg up of knowing his brother a little bit as a receiver and might be able to work in with some chemistry if he can learn the offense. And again, he might have had a leg up of learning the offense because his brother's the quarterback. So do you think that, there's an outside shot you might even see him as, again, he's another big-bodied boundary receiver? I think they got to find something like that. Do you think that's realistic, or a freshman receiver, do we know what we get with what we saw last year?
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I think with Liam specifically, it might, hurt him that he wasn't an early enrollee, right? He came in the summer. So, that's a factor, certainly. But yeah, I'm if I'm James Franklin, I'm open to that. If I'm Mike Yurcich, I'm open to that. Because like we said, again, we have no idea. It's not like he's unseating some solidified starter who can produce for you. It's a position where Penn State has to figure something out, and it's not. Penn State can't afford to not give some of the younger guys a look, because if they're the guy that's going to help you, then they're the guy. You can't have a veteran bias here, because again, a lot of these veterans have had opportunity after opportunity, and they haven't really taken it. So it's a position where you have to be open to something like that for sure, I think.
Training camp battles here on the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. That's Dave Eckert, writer for Blue White Illustrated. We're talking about training camp battles, and this position in particular, the boundary receiver, I highlighted on a previous edition of the BWI Daily during 5 breakout players for 2021, because I think that this is a highly underrated position. And if you look at historically, Mike Yurcich and the way he uses his offense, it could be a very big position. So whoever wins this might have a chance for a breakout season. So go check out that episode along with the rest of the BWI Daily, either on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Speaking of that, speaking of interesting positions and how they're going to fit into Mike Yurcich's offense, the tight end position, is it wide open? Is it not wide open? This is one I don't have a really good read on, because all 3 players we have such high opinions on, of Theo Johnson, Tyler Warren, and Brenton Strange. Strange has been the starter, but is that an open position, or do you think that they're all going to play? What is your read on the tight end position? Because it's one to me that I don't have a great read on.
I don't know if I would describe it as open, right? I think Brenton Strange is probably the favorite, but I don't think he's a huge favorite. Because you look at Theo Johnson, right? I mean, there's so much to love about Theo Johnson. He's huge. He's huge, and he's athletic. And he definitely flashed last season. He wasn't perfect, but he made some plays. And I think he looked pretty good blocking too. Although I don't think his PFF rating agrees with me. But
there is something about that though. So there's looking good at it, and there's having the ability to, and then there's knowing your assignment. And those two things, sometimes in the PFF grade, if you don't, that might be one of the differences. Is he's dominating people on some plays, but on the majority of plays, he's not hitting his assignment properly. So it can be a couple of different things, but you're right. And to tell people what's up with Theo Johnson, 6'6", 250 plus pounds, almost 260 at this point. And this offseason, he ran a 4.51. That is a modern day monster. Holy cow. That is crazy. He developed at a pace that I wasn't expecting. I didn't think he'd get there this early in his development. Do you think he can legitimately push Brenton Strange for those snaps at tight end?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If he, like we said, maybe makes some progression with the mental side of the game, because, he's young. So, that's the thing for a guy like him. It's obvious that he has the tools. It's obvious that he has the physical and athletic ability. It's going to be, how quickly does it click up here? So, it's going to depend. And it's tough for us to know that right now. But again, I think Penn State has really good options here. I think, maybe there's a little bit of a contrast between, the boundary receiver position that we just talked about, where it's just kind of like you hope that something sticks, or somebody sticks. And I don't really think that's the case here. I think whoever wins this job, Penn State is gonna have a really good tight end next season.
I think they should do the Kyle Pitts thing. Just put Theo Johnson at receiver and start him at tight end, flex him to receiver, see what happens. Deploy him wherever. I just want to see what happens when he gets the football, because we have not seen enough of those tight ends with the football in their hands. And honestly, I love Brenton Strange's game. I think he's got that twitchy explosiveness. If he can learn to break tackles, he's going to be a huge problem himself. He is 256 pounds at 6'3", so a thick dude that runs a 4.64. Again, like Theo Johnson stole the show running a 4.51 this offseason, but both Tyler Warren and Bretton Strange at 250 plus pounds ran a 4.6. These guys aren't slow. So they've got a ton of talent at that position. I want to just touch on this position quickly, and this will wrap up the offense, I think, for us today. The guard position. I just put guard out there because Penn State, when they are settled at tackle, really they run 3 guards onto the field for the most part. So who are the guys that you're looking in that trio that are going to play at the guard position? Maybe give me 3 or 4 that you're looking at, and the battle might be just for who gets those third reps more so than a starter at that left guard position.
Sure. I think maybe the group that I'm kind of looking at there is probably Juice Scruggs, Sal Wormley, Des Holmes, and then maybe a little bit of an outsider's pick is Bryce Effner, who's a guy that James Franklin has kind of gone out of his way to praise. When he's talking about that position, and usually when he does that, he's kind of hinting like, "Hey, maybe talk about this guy." So I think that's a guy that should be included. But again, Scruggs is a guy who we got to see a little bit of. A lot of some of the other guys we didn't really get a great idea for, but these are guys who were pretty highly touted recruits. Have had a while here to develop in the case of a couple of them. I think Phil Troutwine is a guy who's going to get the best out of these guys. So I'm excited to see what he can do with a full preseason, a full off season with Penn State's offensive line.
By the way, if you haven't checked it out, check out his Twitter, Phil Troutwine's Twitter. He took the entire offensive line group out to a restaurant here in State College, and I'm assuming they didn't have any food left in the kitchen after they were making a run to Walmart to go get more food because that many people that size eating food. That's got to be that was an insane day in the kitchen at that restaurant. The interesting thing is I do think Juice Scruggs is the obvious starter, the leader in that group. I thought Landon Tengwall would get more run at guard than at tackle, but so far, and this is where it's tough because not that we ever get to see in-depth stuff during spring practice, but we really didn't get to see anything this spring. We got to see 2 scrimmages, and a lot of guys were missing from those. So that he would be one name that I would throw in, another freshman that I would throw in as a guy that has a very advanced game. But if he's playing tackle, I don't see him splitting reps with Caden Wallace on the right side. And that seems to be where he is listed and where they're going to try him out at tackle. And 6'6", great length, really smart football player. You obviously want to put your best players at tackle and groom a guy like that for the future. So that would be the one name that we didn't talk about that I would have my eye on, but at this point, I think it's TBD with him. So we're going to move to the other side of the ball, and I think the marquee training camp battle at the defensive end position, Nick Tarburton and Smith Vilbert on that strong side defensive end. What do you see about that position, and what are you looking for as far as who's going to win that position and the skills that they're going to bring to it? What do you think is going to win them that position?
Yeah. I think you look at a guy like Nick Tarburton, right? Again, just injury after injury. And he's a guy who was a linebacker in high school. He's been a little bit of a transplant at the defensive end position. We haven't gotten to see a lot of him. And again, we're just kind of taking people's word for it that, he's a good player. And so I'm excited to hopefully see a little bit of him. But yes, Smith Vilbert, again, he's another guy that, again, this spring we heard a lot about. So I'm excited about both of those guys. I guess it's kind of hard for me to pick a leader because we don't know what we have with especially Nick Tarburton, right? So I guess I'll hold off on that. But I think those are 2 pretty good depth options there.
And by the way, I'm separating this with Adisa Isaac and Arnold Ebikidi. Basically, he's a co-starter on the other side. All these guys are going to play at the defensive end position, so that's not really in question. I think we're going to see all of them. But on the early downs with Tarburton, I think that's going to be where he makes his hay as a run defender and as a guy that is going to be a smart physical player that's going to cause problems for the offense. But the upside play is absolutely Smith Vilbert, 6'6", 260 as a defensive end, moves really well. So if you're a Penn State fan, as you know, that might be what you would want to hope for, is the guy that has, you know, super potential. It,
Sure.
you know, realizes all of that, and he hits the high end of his play, and Tarburton can be a good player that gets to see snaps and is valuable in his role. But to me, the question is going to be, does he have the power and the length to be a pass rusher? Because that's going to have to be his game as far as the power sort of pass rusher, not necessarily the complete defensive end. Either way, I think they're both good players at that position. I'm interested to see, like you said, what either of them are. And this is another one of those things from 2020 that we just don't know because we got to see so much less than we normally do. I want to skip ahead to the one that I find most interesting that you highlighted when we were going over this, and that's safety. Tell me about the safety battle you're looking at.
Sure. So obviously, you know, Penn State has one locked down safety starter, Jaquan Brisker, right? But you know, to play alongside Jaquan Brisker, you know, you've got two guys in Jonathan Sutherland and Jair Brown, who, you know, again, it's hard to pick a favorite at this point. I think both of those guys are going to get a shot in camp. So yeah, that's really interesting to me because I guess just looking at it from the player's point of view, right? I mean, Jonathan Sutherland is a guy who's been here forever at this point, and he's been reliably contributing both on special teams and kind of in like a depth role for years. You know, he's not a guy who just started playing last season. And then you look at Jair Brown, you know, he's a junior college guy, and again played in a backup role last year, but for him, you know, both of these guys will feel like they have to win the job this year. So there's a lot at stake for both of them personally, I think, which kind of makes this interesting if you look at it from that perspective. But obviously, if you're a Penn State fan, you know, you want to know who's starting beside Jaquan Brisker. So it's going to be an interesting fall for these guys.
I want to get to something you just said in a second because it's super interesting, and I got to ask you a question. But
Sure.
if you want more analysis on the Penn State football season, which, by the way, a week away from the start of training camp, we're on the edge of it. Get the 2021 Penn State football preview issue because it's here. 166 pages. This is a huge volume. I have it right here. Hold on. Let me just show you. This is a huge magazine. You guys put a lot of work into this. Look at how many pages you got. And the cover's awesome. Like, it's just chock full. It's a full color magazine. Comprehensive guide to the Nittany Lions' upcoming season, packed with exclusive content, interviews, features, opinions, analysis, everything you want for your season preview. Learn more at bluewhiteonline.com or by calling 800-421-7751. 800-421-7751 or bluewhiteonline.com. Did you say Jaquan Brisker? Okay, so I've only ever heard it Jaquan Brisker.
Oh, yeah.
Is this?
I think it's probably Jaquan. I think I misspoke there, but yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
No. I'm not trying to call you. I'm not trying to call you out. This would be in a long line of Tyrod Taylors and Odafe Owe situations that I want to make sure, like, I didn't miss the boat or I didn't miss something, and it's like, no, he actually said it's Jaquan. I wanted to clarify because that is something that has happened quite frequently.
Yeah,
it's
one of those words, like, you know, you just say Brisker, right? You don't say the first name that often, so when you do, you kind of stumble on it. But yeah, it's Jaquan.
Okay. By the way, I'm sorry. I did not mean to embarrass you in any way. I had to clarify because that has happened a lot. The last position we're going to talk about today, because I know you got to get out of here. This is an interesting situation because, again, versatility is a part of this. And it's the three technique position, Derek Tangelo and Hakeem Beamon at that three technique position. What do you see from the transfer and the young guy who got a lot of run last year? And I think a lot of people are high on at that three technique position between Beamon and Tangelo.
Yeah, and Tangelo's interesting, right? Because I think he gives you a lot of pass rush upside. So, you know, I think he's a guy, again, that might have been the best thing that he did at Duke last season. You know, his pass rushing ability. So maybe he's a guy that you use later, you know, late down situations, and, you know, look to use Beamon in early down situations. I don't know what Penn State has planned there. But yeah, again, another interesting one because you've got a veteran against a guy who's a little bit more inexperienced, but showed flashes. So, I think if Beeman is able to win that job outright, you've got to feel really good about it, because you've got a nice baseline there, I think, in Derek Tangelo. So, I think, again, two good options for Penn State. I think PJ Mustipher alongside them is, going to have a better year than he did last year. He's added some weight. He's back where he's more comfortable. So, yeah, I think Penn State should feel pretty good about both those options.
Yeah, and again, this is another position where I think they can feel confident. Why they brought in Tangelo is because they needed more players, more bodies that they feel like they can rely on, because they run so many at the defensive line position. To me, Tangelo, the interesting thing is I think he can play nose a little bit. Like when I was studying his film at Duke, he can hold the point of attack pretty well, and he was a major force along the defensive line because he was the only one that could. So when he wasn't in the game, it did not go well for Duke when they tried to stop the run. So I think you might even see in some pass rushing situations Mustipher come off the field, and you see both of those guys on the field. It's kind of like the conversation we just had about the safety position. Sutherland to me is more of a box safety. So when we're talking about those guys, I think he's kind of the odd man out in that situation of, I don't know that he can be in a battle because he's going to be behind Brisker. It's the opposite of this situation where the fit, I think, is pretty good, where all three of those guys can see the field. And then one guy that I don't think should play this year because he's recovering from a knee injury, but I had so much fun watching his film at community college, was Jordan Vandenberg, who can play that 3 technique position and is weirdly fast for how big he is. So to me, that's just a wild card to put out there. I don't want to see him play. I want to see him take that redshirt year and develop and become something crazy, because I think he can be. But if they ever get in a tough situation, he might be a guy that leapfrogs because of his more mature physique and everything coming in from community college last year. But that's how I see that 3 technique position. Is I do see it as one where there's a lot of flexibility there. And as you said, Tangelo provides a good pass rushing option, so they don't really have a weakness along that defensive tackle line. Any other closing thoughts before we get you out of here about other training camp battles maybe that we didn't highlight, or guys that you're looking in general, specifically about a player that you're excited to see this fall?
No, I mean, I think maybe you look at the backup quarterback battle, if that's a thing, right?
That's a sexy one right there.
Yeah. Christian Veilleux and Daquan Robeson there, but I don't know that that's something that's gonna, if Sean Clifford is healthy, that's not gonna matter.
Right.
So that's something that you've got your eye on, though, because if he's not healthy, then it really matters.
Yeah.
So
it also matters for the future, right? So if one of those guys steps up and becomes something, all of the consternations and the math that people are doing in their head about 2022, you feel a lot better if one of those guys steps up and is a good quarterback and, is a reliable backup behind Sean Clifford. You kind of feel better about the future. But you're right, in the immediate time, probably not a huge thing when it comes to this particular training camp. Dave Eckert, writer for Blue White Illustrated, on with me again. I always enjoy you coming on. Thanks for coming on the BWI Daily Edition.
Yeah, it's always great. Definitely looking forward to the next time already.
I'm host Thomas Frank Carr. We'll be back again on Monday. Make sure you hit subscribe, wherever you get your podcast, or Blue White Illustrated on YouTube.